You're live now, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the third meeting of the Family Services Select Committee. I am Councillor Evans, the Select Committee Chair, Janet Evans. This meeting is being held in accordance with recent government regulations on holding virtual meetings. Please bear with us if we run into any technical challenge during the meeting, as in line with government guidance, it is being held via Microsoft Teams, live conferencing, and all of us are joining from remote locations. The event is also being streamed live, and members of the public and the media are welcome to follow the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. I would like to welcome any first-time viewers and listeners to this Family Services Select Committee. As in all of our meetings, I think it would be appropriate for us to start with a 72-second silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Can everyone mute, and can our officer please let us know when the 70 seconds is over? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I would like also to add our committee's condolences for anyone who has lost someone during this pandemic. Our heart goes out to you, and I hope we can be helpful. Thank you. At the outset, I would ask the members of the committee only unmute your microphone when you are addressing the committee. And likewise, to save bandwidth, I would ask that councillors only switch on their cameras when speaking and remember to switch it off when you have finished speaking. If a councillor wishes to speak on a particular item and has not been called to speak, please indicate by typing the letter Q in the conversation column, by using the hand up feature, or by drawing my attention by speaking up. I am now going to put up my chat room. Excellent. Please do not use the conversation column for other comments, as they can be seen by all participants and are retained. We also would like to make sure the momentum of the meeting is efficient. To assist your fellow councillors, officers, and members of the public watching online to identify you, please state your name before you speak. If for any reason your connection drops and you miss something, please can you let us know? In the event that my connection drops, I nominate Vice Chair Councillor Hamish Adurian to take over the meeting. I confirm that I have no declarations of interest to make regarding any items of the agenda. I will now turn to my committee members. Could members also let us know if you have any declarations to make after introducing yourself? I will call on each member and you will then turn on your microphone and introduce yourself and to say whether or not you have any declarations. Councillor Adorian.
Good evening, everyone. It's Councillor Hamish Adorian and no declarations.
Councillor Judith Blakeman.
Hello, Councillor Judith Blakeman, no declarations.
Councillor Nadia Nile.
Hello, Chair. Councillor Nadia Nile, no declaration.
Thank you. Councillor Julie Mills.
Good evening, Chairman. Julie Mills, Norland Ward. No declarations of interest or no declarations of conflict or pecuniary interest in any agenda items this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Williams.
Councillor Charles Williams, I have no declarations of interest to make.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell Woodger.
Councillor Maxwell Woodger, Queensgate Ward, no declarations of interest.
Now our co-optees. Father Samuel McNally has sent his apologies, so he will not be here tonight. Richard Derecky, Parent Governor Representative.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Derecky, Co-optee, nothing to declare, no interest to declare.
Thank you. Estela Gomez, Parent Governor Representative.
Nothing to declare.
Thank you. Kathleen Williams,
Kathleen
Representative.
Kathleen Williams, no interest to declare.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned, apologies for absence from Father McNally Cross, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Declarations of interest we have done. Minutes of the meeting we will take at the end. Is that agreed? Thank you. Now, we are going to have our topic tonight, which is the topic of children's safeguarding, at item A4 and A6. The welfare of all children and young people in the borough is a top priority for the council, and more so this year when children and young people have been subject to unique pressures associated with the impact of this health crisis, principally related to the closure of educational and childcare settings, but also impacting on the protections and safeguarding of vulnerable children during this time. We will be scrutinizing two reports: the Independent Review Officer Report for Looked After Children, 2019 and 2020, and the Child Protection Report, 2019 and 2020. The Local Safeguarding Children Partnership Annual Report, A6 in this agenda, has been withdrawn after publication because it is a tri-borough report and full sign-off could not be obtained in time for this meeting. Now I would like to welcome Jane Humphreys to present these papers to assist and advise in this task. Jane is with us today and she will share with us her report. Jane was Corporate Director of Children, Education and Social Care at Stockton-on-Tees Borough Council for 7 years and currently works for Local Government Association, the LGA. She provides this LGA providing independent expertise on safeguarding to LGA members. She is here to advise committee members, but will not be asking questions to the officers.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome. Good evening. Happy to advise members if they need me.
Okay, I will take the report as read. I understand that Marcia Rainford Hay, Byborough IRO Service Manager, Angela Flayhive, Head of Safeguarding Review and Quality Assurance, and their colleagues will be answering our questions. I will take questions. Welcome, first of all, Martha and Angela. I will take questions on the report from members of the committee first, followed by councillors attending and members of the public. Any would anyone like to make any questions or comments about the content of the report and make recommendations for change and improvement? I will start, if I may, with a question, and then we will ask for the committee. We are concerned as a committee about the cultural placements. Have language been, communication been taken into consideration, religious beliefs, food allergies? If someone doesn't eat pork, how is that conveyed? Could you please address these diversity issues?
Good evening, everybody. Hi, it's Angela Flarhide here, who I am the Borough Head of Safeguarding Review and Quality Assurance. Give apologies for Marsha, who I directly line manage, and I'm here to represent the service tonight and answer questions. And I oversee the work of the IRO service within Kensington and Chelsea. In terms of placement, matching and suitability in terms of cultural, language, religious and food requirements, all of these are taken into account with the matching of a child to a placement, or actually I should put it the other way around, the matching of a placement to meet the child's needs. I think you'll see from the report we have a significant high number of our looked after children are unaccompanied asylum seeking children, and the issues of diversity are significant. And where possible, we try to obtain a cultural and ethnic match. That is not always possible, but we try to achieve as close to that as we can. There are additional services that we will engage with, and community groups and the Refugee Council, for instance, to ensure that there is wraparound service that is culturally appropriate and supports that placement as well. Clearly, language is a significant issue, and there's barriers there in terms of communication, which we look to overcome with the use of interpreters, and we've strengthened that offer and try to ensure we have the same interpreter throughout. We recognise that relationships are key to all of this, and that's regardless of which professional is working with that child. When we look to accommodate a child and the suitability of any placement, we have a needs, we do an assessment of their needs, and that may include if they have allergies, for instance, and the placement will be fully informed of what those needs are. And things may emerge when we've placed certain children as we go along, and that's part of the care plan being developed and the role of the IRO to see that we're effective in the delivery of that care plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mills, you had some questions?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Fahivia, for the report. I think both in relation to both reports I raised in the pre-meeting, I found the reports very officer focused, I hope you won't mind me saying, and no disrespect at all to the immense work that will have gone into this. But I couldn't hear the voice of the child in these reports. I was very worried by the fact that there was no reference. You've now made the reference to interpreters, and couldn't understand either how you would address the emotional needs of a child that will have come away, been separated from its parents, often doesn't give its name. I know from my own other work outside of the council that sometimes even the countries that the children come from will remain a secret to the host country. So I was concerned that the voice of the child is not in your report, but the rather more, and again, I don't mean this in any way offensively or disrespectfully, but there was a sense of self-congratulatory messaging all about sort of officers and external officers and independent officers and boards outside of the council, and everybody saying what a marvellous job they'd done. But I think for anybody who works with children who have been so displaced, we will all know that the outcomes into adulthood are very rarely positive and very rarely integrated. So my plea to officers, having read so many of these reports over the years, is can we now move to a more bottom-up than top-down relationship with those we look after? I noticed the bubbles are the only voice of the children in here, and I didn't come away feeling comforted.
Okay.
or reassured by what was said by the children in those bubbles. So that's a kind of just a general, if I may, view on it. But as I say, I'm sure your intentions are excellent.
If I can have an opportunity to address that, yes, I mean, I recognise about the voice of the child probably not being as prevalent in this report as you would like, and I will take that on board for the next annual report. But I want to assure you that the voice of the child and their participation and contribution to all areas and all decisions made about their life are key, and it runs throughout. It is the very fabric of, and stitching of the work that we undertake with those children, young people and their families wherever possible. We are very attuned to the trauma that young people have. Any child becomes looked after has had childhood trauma, been affected by that, and none more so than those children who come as unaccompanied minors to be looked after. We are developing our trauma-informed approach to that work. We work very closely with our mental health colleagues to address that. Our whole systemic approach to building relationships and having the continuity and consistency of professionals in those children's lives is key to that as well. In terms of outcomes, yes, I think, for all children who are looked after, just by the nature of the reasons they become looked after, their outcomes are not as good as we would wish, or not as good in comparison to other borough resident children. But I also think that we need to recognise that, we've had 2 inspections now where we have, it's been our work in this field has been recognised. We have a number of strengths, but there is always room to develop and improve. And I suppose that's one thing I'm really focused on doing, is not standing still on these issues.
If I may ask one follow-up question, Chairman, I'm conscious that we want and there's many to come. But yes, in terms of the panel and the social workers, and may I say, I think continuity amongst the social workers and those who looked after children is if that is happening, that's really a positive outcome. It certainly hasn't been happening, as you know, for many years. But what about the equality and diversity and empathy and trauma training of those people dealing directly with children? So to ask a very specific question, for a child coming from Somalia, will there be anybody of Somalian or East African heritage who would be able to relate to that child and to whom that child could relate? That's just an example. It could be any distress. Tigray, for example, is in the news at the moment. So is Sudan. So what is the complexion of your social service when relating to these children, please?
So in terms of foster placements, we do have we do make strenuous attempts to recruit from a range of backgrounds that are similar to the children that we're looking after. In terms of the social work, that is a longer term plan in terms of addressing and having a workforce population that is more representative of the service of the children that we serve, and we're taking strides in taking that forward. We do engage in with a number of voluntary sector organisations and the Refugee Council as well, to ensure that we can access services. Religious needs are also addressed, linking in with mosques, churches, and other religious groups. So we don't do this in isolation, and we don't pretend to be the experts either. And this is part of our continuing to learn and grow and develop.
Perhaps we should have a follow-up report, Madam Chairman, not in a year, but more maybe in 3 months, to see how the recruitment and diversity is going. I know it's a very strong topic within the council at the moment, and reports coming out about institutional, whatever one wants to call it, emphasis. And so perhaps it would be good to have a written report would be fine in the not too distant future, to see how there are improvements being made on that sort of recruitment and therefore outcomes. I think a suggestion.
It's a good suggestion. Can the officers note that? Catherine, could you make a note of that for the minutes? We're going to have a report on BAME overly disproportionate representation in exclusions, and that is coming in April, but this edition is excellent. Thank you very much. Hands up, I see, is Hamish Adorian, Councillor Adorian.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I have a series of, three questions in relation to some of the areas identified for potential concern, which are listed in section 9.3, and also one additional one as well for another section. The first one, I'll try and summarize them all at once, and then we can take them one at a time as appropriate. My first one is about unregulated placements, and perhaps it might be helpful for the benefit of all present and for members of the public as well, if you could give us a short summary of what that means in comparison to more regulated placements. Are we trying to actively reduce these? Do we already have an excessive number of placements in unregulated placements, and what are the specific concerns there? That's my first question specifically on that. My second one is on educational engagement and attainment. Do we have specific concerns around educational outcomes of children, looked after children versus children who are not looked after? Is there a significant gap that's arisen? And my third question is about children in care going missing. This seems to have come up a couple of times in the report. So really my question is, has that actually happened in 2019-20? If it has, what are the reasons and what are we looking to do about it?
Very good question.
So if I take the first one about unregulated placements, unregulated placements applies to mainly semi-independence accommodation, where children over the age of 16 are placed and are not regulated by Ofsted. So that's one stipulation. It's normally in respect to semi-independence accommodation. Unregistered provision is in relation to usually foster care arrangements or care arrangements with connected persons that aren't approved by, say, our fostering. So it may be that somebody becomes deregistered, but the child remains there whilst we look at other plans. And therefore it's for a short period of time, and those arrangements can only be signed off by the Director of Family Services. They are very rare. We currently have none active in this time frame. So that's the first. I think the concern around our unregulated placements is having a grip on their safeguarding activity within those and ensuring we quality assure those provisions, because they don't have the same oversight as our children's homes would have. So that's a role that the independent reviewing officers have to ensure, as well as the care plan, that the provision is meeting that child's needs. And that's where we're developing a framework to quality assure those mechanisms for children 16 plus living in semi-independent accommodation. Does that answer your first part of the question?
Yes, thank you. Just a brief follow-up before you move on to the next one. How often does that typically arise during the course of a year, that situation where a child is in an unregulated placement?
An unregulated placement, so semi-independence?
Yeah.
I think if you look at the report for those new starters in that last year, of which there were 53, 27 of those were placed in semi-independent accommodation. So
thank you. Yeah, for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have Councillor Nall and then Councillor Williams, please.
Sorry, Chair, I think there were two further questions which Angela was going to answer there.
Okay.
I'll answer them very quickly. I know there are a number of questions. Education and attainment for our looked after children and care leavers in comparison resident children is, we do recognise that the trauma impacts upon their capacity to attain or be engaged, though we do strive. The work of the virtual school is key in that, in the support. So it's not just the practical support that they provide, but also the emotional support, the wraparound care to enable the children, young people, to do the best that they can to achieve. Are not in education or training numbers are continuing to decline. So we have more young people now in educational training or work than previously. And I think then the last question was around the children in care who go missing. We do have a missing children's coordinator. There are quarterly and annually reports presented. We have a small number of young people who go missing. Majority of those are 16 plus. There are a very small number, 3 or 4 young people who go missing frequently and account for the high number of episodes. And we have safety plans in respect to all of those young people. Some of those are most vulnerable, so we need to ensure, and there is a lead safeguarding officer who oversees those plans and effectiveness, and they coordinated through the multi-agency professionals that work with them. And we ensure that they have return home interviews, welfare checks. We try to understand the push and pull factors that contribute to those missing episodes to reduce that, and try to reduce risk and work with them so that they are also risk aware and safety aware as well, and have plans in place that they can act upon at that age.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Nall.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well, actually.
Thank you, but sorry, I can't turn my, because I've changed the computer I'm using. Thank you for the report. My first question is about, could you share some of that feedback you mentioned from children, young people and families about the children in care reviewing process? The other question, table 3 has suggested that there are 3 children currently looked after children in health setting. Is that correct? And is this something to be concerned about? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take your second question first, if that's okay. The 3 children named in that also, that heading, category heading, which is defined by our Department of Education returns, includes therapeutic settings. So those 3 young people are in placements that have additional therapeutic need. So they're not what we would call tier 4 hospital accommodation placements. They are placements with therapeutic care. So I would say that they are some of our most vulnerable, but they're in those placements because they're meeting their need and there's robust care and safety plans in place. Does that answer your second question?
Yes. Thank you.
So in terms of views of the young people themselves, it is key to the work we do. Their looked after children reviews are written to them in the form of letters. They contribute fully, as you can see from the report, in terms of the participation. It continues to be strong. Something I think we have, 72% of children and young people attend their actual review, and 94 contribute in some way, either verbally, written, or through an advocate. So we do have high kind of involvement, engagement rates for that. I think during COVID, we've adapted the way we work. So many of our looked after children reviews have been online, so using Microsoft Teams as a platform. So the social worker may be present in the placement with the carer and the child, young person themselves, and the IRO and any other professional will be virtually present. And what children and young people have actually responded, and we've done some parental feedback, or some engagement feedback around that, and actually that they probably engage on that platform much more effectively and positively than we who may be not grown up with that type of kind of interaction. digitally online. And there's been actually fuller contribution to those meetings and those discussions, and having they still have the opportunity as well to meet one-to-one with their independent reviewing officer as well online. So there is actually much more engagement currently than there was.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Councillor Williams, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In Table F, nearly half the children, the reason for ceasing to be a child in care, it said was for any other reason. So could we have perhaps this year, now and in future, more detail on this?
Yes, I'm afraid that is because of how the DfE require us to respond in our returns. So that may be, for instance, special guardianship. There may be that, there may be a number of reasons, but yes, I can get that broken down for you.
Yes, and a sort of more general comment. I think it would be nice in future to perhaps have a more thematic discussion and look, say, at unaccompanied asylum seekers, and then have a section on very young children taken into care, things like that, and sort of what the challenges and the outcomes are.
Yes, I mean, for the purposes of this report, it's our quality assurance oversight in the council of how we deliver services to those children. But yes, us as officers would most definitely be able to provide that.
Thank you.
Yes, could you answer a question, please? In terms of the different placements of the children, do you have the same standards in evaluating those placements?
So there are different, so those children who are, there are different regulatory frameworks depending on what type of placement there is, and so there's different inspection frameworks. So those children who are in foster care, for instance, will be with the registered foster care and be subject to our Ofsted inspection of our fostering services. Those children who are, say, within a children's home will be regularly will be subject to their own regulatory inspection framework, and they have ongoing what they call Regulation 32 inspections, where peers or an independent person will on a monthly basis audit their activity within the children's home to make sure that the procedures as well as the care of the children is compliant with our expectations. And then we have, in respect to our unregulated placements for semi-accommodation. So our placements team plays a key role in quality assuring that provision. So we're part of a pan-London agreement. And we won't place any children in services that aren't good or outstanding. So that's the general bar that we go by. When provisions may become, their grading may become requires improvement or inadequate, we will review that care plan and whether or not that placement does meet that child's needs still, or we feel that it wouldn't and we require to move them. We do that with hesitancy, especially if the child is settled, but we will evaluate in the round.
I see. Thank you very much. Now I see Richard Derricky has a question. And Jane, I see you had your hand up. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, Chair, there's a number of comments, but should I wait until the end and then come back?
Please. Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you. Richard Derricky, our co-optee.
Yes, thank you. Just picking up on that point about the young people who are in unregulated. So you're comfortable in terms of the places that those young people are in, even though it's unregulated, you feel comfortable that the service has put in sufficient quality assurance processes so that you are comfortable that those children are getting the support they should be getting in those unregulated placements. Is that right?
I don't know whether I would say that I am confident in the placement structures that we have in place prior to and ensuring that we match the placement to that child's needs. at that point. And then there is a rigorous appointment of overseeing the care plans and their delivery, both by the social worker themselves, the team manager, the independent reviewing officer, and the other professionals involved. So there is rigour to overseeing the placements for any child under the age of 18 who's looked after, and rigour to the leaving care offer as well. We continue to be aware and curious. We do thematic auditing of that activity. I ask that my IROs report back on concerns, and we escalate, and we use the escalation and challenge protocols that exist. And we have instigated safeguarding planning meetings where there are any concerns, as we would do in any other situation.
Okay, thank you for that. And in terms of children who go missing,
yes,
one of the important tools, I guess, for better understanding what's happening to that young person and what they're thinking and what they're feeling are the return interviews.
yes.
I'm just wondering if you have a sense of what proportion of those children that go missing, are prepared to and complete a return interview.
So the current figure stands at 80% for those that are completed within 72 hours. So we've just received, we just had an annual report of last year, but also we've just received our Q2 activity report as well for this financial year. So that continues to rise. There is a issue for me about that I like to focus is on the quality of that interview and what information is brought from that increases the professional understanding of those push and pull factors. And really that's also down to the relationship that the professional undertaking that interview has with that child. But it is key to respond early and engage as early as possible, and for that young person to know how acutely interested we are in their welfare and well-being.
And I mean, do we need to get that figure up to 100%?
I think the reason why it's at 80% is some young people would decline to engage. There's also, as I spoke before, there is a small number, 3 or 4 young people that account for a frequent number of missing episodes. And in that respect, sometimes in terms of engagement, it's better to maybe respond with one interview, return home interview for a couple of episodes. And that's why we won't ever get the engagement up to 100%.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Any members of the committee? Any other councillors?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, please, if everyone has had a turn. I wanted to talk about the very, very serious issue of criminal activity for our looked after children. I mean, it's mentioned in the report, child prostitution, drugs, children being used as mules, but nowhere in the report is there a link between how many children that we look after end up in the criminal justice system and therefore have a criminal record, and whether there is activity afterwards to connect social workers through with probation officers, through with parole officers. I really think that kind of granular information would be helpful to officers to evaluate really whether what's happening in a child's childhood, which will lead eventually to negative, particularly criminal outcomes potentially, should be a continuing and informative pattern of your work. So may I ask, even if it's privately to myself in due course, exactly how many of our looked after children have now got a criminal record, and what are we doing about those that we currently know are in very dangerous situations, running drugs and child prostitution, number one. And number two, the 40 cases in the courts, are those over and above the 104?
No, that they're inclusive. They will be inclusive of those.
Okay.
But they may spread. Yes, I mean, no court case fits within the 1 year timetable. So it's you're getting a picture within 1 year in this report.
Well, it said sort of 23 last year and then obviously 13 current. And I was just wondering, of those court orders, how many of them really work In other words, how often have you got to go back to the courts to have the court order reviewed because it hasn't been carried out properly? Again, you can let me know that in due course, but I think this committee should be concerned about the fact that vulnerable children are ending up in prostitution and drugs, because those children come back to the neighbourhood older. And of course, we then have gang violence, and we have adult crime back in the borough. And I'm not sure that there's been any link at all made, even a discussion of that, for what's a very, very live problem. So I wondered if you might have anything to say about that.
Councillor, I think you're referring to my child protection activity report when you're recalling those specific areas that require attention, and they are quite serious. I would say that sorry, Chair, would you like me to answer this now or wait until we come on to the next report?
I think we'll make that the first question when we come on to the next report. We're due to sum up here.
Sorry, it got a bit mixed up because I thought people were oscillating between the two reports. So I thought I'd get in my question on that paper. So I'm sorry if I'm speaking out of turn, but the question remains.
Duly noted, and you stole my question. So I'm happy that great minds think alike here. Okay, does any other councillor or co-optee have a question? Otherwise, we can have Jane Humphreys have a word. Did you want to speak now or after the two papers,
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to this report, really some observations and reflections back. And if I talk from the beginning of the members' questions, talking about the voice of the child, you're all very fully aware that these children are your children. You're the corporate parent for them. And I am assuming that this committee will at times invite some of the children and young people to come and actually present at your committee. If that hasn't happened, doesn't happen, that may be something you want to look at with officers about how you can actually hear directly from children and young people, or it can be done remotely. I've seen it work very well, and Angela's referred to the fact that actually some of this remote working that we've had to adapt and use during the COVID period is actually often meant that children and young people are engaging more because they like that technology. And I've also seen it where children and young people have done their own sort of addendum to report to this independent reviewing officer report, giving their reflections and views about the experience, what they felt's worked well, what maybe hasn't worked so well. And you do have a children in care council or something that will be similarly named. Yes, again, that's an opportunity to get the voice of children and young people. So I think it's a very important thing. You should be able to assure yourself that you know what those children that you're corporate parent for, what they think about the quality of that service. One of the issues I think somebody mentioned about the stability of some of the placements and moves. I think at the last committee last year, I made reference to the Children's Commissioner Stability Index, and that's an index that looks at 3 key issues about stability for children looked after. That's the number of placement moves they might have had, the number of school moves, and the number of social workers. Because actually, if you have a lot of moves of any of those 3, that can be potentially disruptive. And I'm sure the officers will have that information somewhere in their systems. The unregulated placement issue is very topical at the moment, and Ofsted have just finished a consultation on looking at the whole issue of unregulated placements, and it's likely the proposals would be that you will not be able to have unregulated placements for children under 16. I mean, nothing's been published as yet. And I do know in some other local authority areas that they actually do have some young people who are quite simply living in a house or a property with a number of staff, looking after them because their needs are so challenging, but it's not regulated. Angela's obviously referred to those that you've got over 16. Now, a lot of young people, that might be as a move on to independent living. So it actually might be a very positive thing for that child or young person. But you're absolutely right about asking the questions about that quality assurance and those checks and balances that should take place. I think the other issue I wanted to just raise was around the reason that placements cease, the table that members referred to and Angela came back. Actually, when I looked back in this from following from pre-agenda earlier in the week, the majority of those cases, the reasons that people use this particular code is usually because children have become 18 or children may have gone into custody, or they may have actually left the country, but the majority usually they've reached the age of 18. So I think it's, I'm sure officers will have that information if it was needed, but I suspect you will find the majority of those have reached the age of 18. And I think they were the key issues I just wanted to flag up as observations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane Humphreys. To sum up, I'd like to thank Angela for really answering some very difficult questions that are important to all of us. We came up with different issues. One is that the placements are standardized. We would like to talk to the young people, that we have to have more child involvement, even if it's virtual meetings. And that is what most of us felt lacked in the report. We are happy about, we're happy about the return visits, but we would like to see an increase if possible on the return interviews, so to speak. One of the things that keeps coming up with our committee is diversity and the different needs, which would be very important for the placements and for understanding the cultural background of the young people. So I thank you for that, and I look forward to Jane, did you want to say something? Did you raise your hand?
Yes, sorry, Chair. One of the things I just forgot before we move on to the next report. The local government ombudsman have just yesterday produced a report around findings from complaints from children and young people, and the last 2 pages have a number of questions that scrutiny may want to ask. And I'm just thinking that might be useful for moving forward, not for the here and now. It literally came out yesterday. I'll pass the link over to officers so that you've got it and maybe can consider it for a future meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I see one of our officers, Glenn Peach. Did you want to add something?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Thank you for your questions. I had my hand up throughout the meeting, actually, because I wanted to come in at one point. I'm
sorry, we can't see it on here.
Apologies.
Yeah, so write in the chat room. If you write in the chat.
More electronically assertive.
Yes.
I just wanted to reassure members, for some of our select committee members, you may recall that we used to produce an annual corporate parenting report. And within that report, it would have answers to all of the questions that you've posed, things like the education attainment of our looked after children, the ethnic breakdown of our children, the number of placements that they were in, where they were in terms of regulation, etc., etc. That report was requested, I understand, from committee to be ceased and be replaced by this quality assurance report, because all of that information that I've just referred to goes to our corporate parenting board, to which some members are members of. So we're more than happy to change the report if you would want more of a corporate parenting report for you to scrutinise. We can do that. We've done that in the past. But this is the independent reviewing officer report, which I think Councillor Mills picked up, seems very officer orientated, as opposed to perhaps more of a report that can give you a flavour of the child and the voice of the child, which I think the previous report actually did do so. I also wanted to say that we have a 3-year looked after children and care leavers strategy, and one of the strands of that is the voice of the child, because we see that is so important, that we hear the voice of the child regularly and that we understand what their lived experience is of them in care. And those reports also will be going to our corporate parenting board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It seems we've
Madam Chairman,
yes.
May I just there hasn't been an answer this evening from either Mr. Peach or Ms. Wahib about the link to criminality in our looked after children and their passage potentially through the criminal justice system, whether it's at Feltham or it's beyond. And I see that Miss Humphreys has made reference to children at 18, well, probably 16, potentially being in custody. And I would like this evening, if we may, for officers to talk to that, because that is a hugely important subject when it comes to the social the social issues in Kensington and Chelsea. So could somebody please speak to that, and could we please have the figures for how many of our looked after children end up in the criminal justice system, because I think that is a window on the work that's being done and the effectiveness of the work.
That's a very good question, Councillor Mills.
I can say that it's actually relatively low numbers, Councillor Mills. I can certainly give you the figures outside of this meeting, or provide it as a briefing note attached to the meeting. It is low numbers. Obviously, there are some young children that become looked after because they're held in remand, and that therefore makes them a looked after child. But again, the numbers are very low.
I don't wish to be anecdotal here, but members will know that I work in the criminal justice system, and that I see very often Kensington and Chelsea matters, family matters in the courts. So I hear that you say it's low. It's not my personal view. And so rather than say that, could we actually have the numbers? Because I think that would be informative for all of us, both looked after children, you know, because obviously I appreciate that some of the people who will come in front of the courts will not be technically looked after. But I think it is very important, and I know that Councillor Rendell is interested in this, to make the link with our young people and their introduction, or actually avoidance of activities that bring them before the courts. So it is only with that in mind that I ask us to be scrupulous and fastidious, really, and granular about this.
We can certainly provide you with that detail.
I would say that currently we only have 11 children who are subject to criminal legal orders that are being administered through our youth offending team, which is really low. It's something that the local Safeguarding Children's Partnership has queried, and I'm not sure whether it's also an effect of COVID and the court arrangements as such. So we are seeing that young people are awaiting trial for longer periods than they have previously. So there's a much more larger context as well to this, but currently there are very small numbers.
Thank you. I think we've jumped ahead anyway to Child Protection Report, but let me just introduce it formally. And this report informs us of the Council's child protection and safeguarding activity over the 2019 and 20 financial year. The Select Committee has received a child protection report for the last 6 years. The purpose of this item is to review and to comment on how the local authority is discharging its responsibilities in respect to ensuring the protection of children. Child protection involves the identification and assessment of the care that needs to be provided to children and young people who may be at risk of harm. This is one of the responsibilities that the Council has to some of the most vulnerable members of society. If members agree, we will take the report as read. I understand that Angela Flahive, and Glenn Peach will be answering our questions. I will take questions on the report from members of the committee first, followed by councillors attending and members of the public. I see Councillor Blakeman has been so patient and has her hand up. Councillor Blakeman, would you like to lead on this?
Well, I don't know about leading, but I mean, I had a lot of comments which Councillor Mills made in relation to the last report, which she probably did more politely than I would anyway, so we'll have those as read. I found this report very difficult to understand because it was written in jargon. and I'm new to the committee. I was on the committee a few years ago, but I'm new to it now, and the jargon has quite gone beyond me. For example, I inferred from the report that a systemic social work model is a good thing, but I have no idea what a systemic social work model is, so I can't comment on that. I was concerned in paragraph 12.3, where you talk about possibly mainstreaming the work of Medea. I think that would be a terribly retrograde step, particularly because the kind of residents who would relate to Medea and go to Medea for assistance are not the kind of residents who would come to a mainstream office in the council. And finally, I'm also concerned at the back of the report, it begs residents to report safeguarding issues to the council. Now, I have recently, on behalf of residents, reported a safeguarding issue relating to a baby, and I've virtually been brushed off with it. And my residents are very upset about that too, because there is really no incentive for people to report issues if they're going to be brushed off like that. Thank you.
Shall I take the first 2 points? I don't know the detail of the matter that you refer to, and it would in the third, and it wouldn't. I'm sure you understand, wouldn't be appropriate to do so here. But Mr. Peach may wish to respond to in general to that.
Well, that's why I didn't raise it in detail.
Yeah, I can understand. Systemic social work model is part of our approach now for the last 6 years to developing our relationships with children, young people and their families, to be much more effective in terms of the work that we deliver to them, to involve them in and enhance our understanding of the issues they have, and to really encourage effective change and long-standing change with families. So it's taking some of the learning we have from the therapeutic, systemic kind of world of thinking and assisting in developing our own social work approach to engagement with families to be more effective first time round. So that in a nutshell is probably what that is. So it's just really enhancing what our offer is to families from a social work perspective, but also our early help practitioners as well. In respect to 12.3 in Medea, that is only in reference to their work with in respect to female genital mutilation. It's our engagement with a particular community who are affected by that particular area of abuse and harm. In mainstreaming, I think probably what I was trying to get across is especially in terms of the smiling community, it's very hard to hear from them and get and form a relationship with them. So one way through that is engagement community groups, where we can take a message of support and enablement to them directly, and also be able to speak about a range of other safeguarding issues, such as private fostering and the support and the legal status of what that is. There will also, as we know, in many communities, in North Kensington especially, issues about serious youth violence, their children, young people being drawn into gang affiliation, gang membership. And so it's enabled us to have some really good positive conversations about the support that we can offer.
Exactly, that's why it's important not to mainstream it, but to carry on liaising with Medea.
Yes, yeah, no, it's just using that access route as a platform to raise other safeguarding issues.
And who's going to answer the question about the reluctance of residents to report safeguarding issues? Because, I mean, I understand the confidential nature of them, but on the other hand, just to say, oh, we're aware of that and we're dealing with it, and just to keep saying that really doesn't tell the residents anything. It just puts them off reporting.
Glenn, do you want to?
Yeah, sorry, I was raising my hand.
Yes, I see it now.
We can provide you with a report on the referrals that we do get, a number of which are from the public, and they can be anonymous as well. I think that what you also may be referring to, Councillor Blakeman, is an issue that may have been before the courts, that therefore inhibited our ability to be able to discuss the matter because there was legal representatives, and it was in that arena. So I think that might be what you're alluding to, but I may be mistaken.
No, I don't think it's that. I mean, I think if it just sounds as though the issue is going to be swept under the carpet and just taken elsewhere.
I think I probably need some specific examples to be able to.
Yeah, well, Ms. Newman is aware of the case I'm referring to.
Okay.
Can I just come in here, please, Chairman?
Yes, please.
Thank you. No, so back to Councillor Blakeman's question. I think it's a really good point. I think we take all issues of safeguarding seriously. I think we have, we have statutory duty. I have a personal statutory duty, of course. And Judith, that's a very, very interesting and serious issue that you have raised. I think we are always going to encourage anyone, especially in the current COVID crisis, to encourage people to report what they feel is safeguarding issues to us at the council for us to investigate. Of course, since other avenues aren't maybe available, wider family socializing, visits to GPs, some instances of schools are not being available. That's why we need residents such as Councillor Blakeman's residents to report issues such as this. But I think Sarah Newman wants to come in as well. So Sarah may have a comment on that too, but I just want to assure Councillor Blakeman that all issues are taken seriously. I think perhaps one is back on communication, just letting you know where things are, obviously caveated with legal concerns or legal issues, I should say. But thank you for flagging that. I'll take that up.
Is it okay if I come in? Because I think it's a really, really important issue that Councillor Blakeman's raising here, and we've done a lot of work, particularly over the lockdown, about trying to reach residents in order that they feel confident about reporting any concern. One of the difficulties is always that when someone does report a concern, we can't always give them follow-up details about what we've done in order to address it. And that can always be really, really difficult for residents if they feel that they've reported something and then they don't hear about the action that's followed. But absolutely, we want to make sure that people know how they can report concerns, and even if they don't want to report them directly to the council, there are other child protection lines that can be used whereby they will then feed those comments into the local authority. And we have a responsibility to log all of the concerns that are reported to us and then record how we're responding to them. And then we have a quality assurance service that will look at just what our response has been, whether it's been timely and whether it's been appropriate or not. So hopefully, Councillor Blakeman, that gives you some reassurance that when concerns are reported in, we absolutely do follow them up. And if residents aren't feeling confident to report them to us, there will be other helplines that they can use that will feed into our service in order for us to follow them up.
Doesn't really answer my point, but I'll leave it there.
Chairman, I don't know if anybody else's hand is up, but mine's up for a new follow-on from Councillor Blakeman. But I noticed that Mr. Deraki's hand is up. I don't know if they certainly before mine went up, but
you're on mute, Chair. You just need to unmute.
Sorry. Could everyone please speak up when they have a question, because it does not show the names for a lot of people. I'd appreciate that. So Councillor Mills, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I was next in line because I noticed that Ms. Derekey's hand was up because mine is a new point following on from Councillor Blakeman's. So may I speak if no one else wishes to just at this point?
Well, you speak and then Richard Derekey will speak.
So it's good to have you here, Councillor Rendell, and I do want to echo what Councillor Blakeman is saying. I mean, the moment she has mentioned very specific safeguarding issues, which will obviously be between families and officers, but there is a general point. I do get shot down on this, but there is a trust issue that is, I believe, hardening. And that is simply that people are not telling the council anything anymore. And I just really hope that cabinet members will listen to those who are very much, I'm not suggesting that the councils don't work with the community, but there are some who work with very, very marginalised parts of the community who do not feel that they can trust officers with vital family information that may be sensitive, that may be dealing with racism, that may be dealing with bias, and therefore they're not telling many council members also who are not always representative of the communities a number of things. And I believe this is leading to quite a break. I mean, the trust, obviously, we all know there's a trust issue and a reputation issue, but it's, I think, leading to something much more kind of us and them. Now, I don't know. I really keep trying to find out if what I'm hearing is a true representation. But I really think officers and cabinet members need to take stock of this because it's happening across many of the portfolios and it's not just specific to family and children services. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or whether officers would really like to come back on that and see if there is any merit in what perhaps Councillor Blakeman has alluded to and to what I'm saying.
Would you like me to answer that, Chair?
Yes, please.
Councillor Mills, I do find what you're saying very concerning. It isn't something that is of immense surprise, but it is something that our local Safeguarding Children Partnership recognises it, and why we've appointed a young persons and community engagement officer to build up and strengthen our relationships across communities. And, you know, I believe strongly it isn't hard to reach communities, it's hard to hear. And so we need to formulate those relationships and build them and be working collaboration together to address some of those safeguarding issues. But also I very much come from a standpoint of support and enablement for organisations and for the voluntary community sector to do the very best we can by the children in our communities. So I take on board what you're saying, but we are aware of it and we have a programme of action to address it. But I appreciate it might be a long road, as you know, in terms of gaining that trust.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take 4 more questions. We have Richard Derekey, then Councillor Williams, Councillor Dorian, and Councillor Woodger.
Thank you, Chair. Angela, yes. I don't know if you've got the paper in front of you, but I'm interested in paragraph 9.6. Don't know if you can see that.
Yes, I can.
That, okay. And this is about the number of young people being at risk from serious youth violence and criminal exploitation. That's risen from 21 cases in September 2019 to 34 cases in August 2020. So that's quite a significant increase. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about the strains that's putting on your team and whether you've got the resources you feel that are necessary in order to be able to support those young people effectively.
Yes, so that is a significant increase. I agree. I think in part this is down to our much more effective identification of those children at risk, and this is inclusive of also those young people who are vulnerable. So there may be a sibling who is known to be at risk or involved in criminal activity. So yes, there is significant work to do. This is one of our key priorities for the council and for the local safeguarding partnership, as well as for children's services. We now have appointed a designated exploitation safeguarding lead to coordinate and support the operational delivery of our safeguarding plans for those children and young people, but also to assist in my service response to coordinate partners. So from the health, police, the voluntary sector, schools, to engage in ensuring that we're working together in delivering those safety plans for those children. But it is a significant amount of work and a significant priority for my service and children's services.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that. And if you look at 9.7,
yes.
Now this is about the children who are vulnerable to exploitation and who are considered possible victims of modern day slavery.
Yes.
Now, as of September 2020, Children's Services have undertaken 7 referrals over the course of the 12 months. And that seems, I mean, this is a very, very serious issue. So all those 7 young people are clearly very vulnerable and at risk. Could you just tell me a little bit about what the next step for those young people is as they go through the national referral mechanism, and just really want to be reassured that those young people are safely out of harm's way now?
So those 7 referrals were made in reference to children who are vulnerable to criminal exploitation, but also those children where there is evidence around trafficking. So that much of that is in respect to our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who may be trafficked into this country, and it's part of their story before becoming looked after. But it has an impact upon their evidence as to whether they have leave to remain in the UK afterwards. So that decision for them, and if grounds are met, you do need some fairly concrete evidence about that. The National Referral Mechanisms ensures that they're on the right pathway, and the Home Office are aware as well. In respect to children who are resident children who are subject to those referrals for criminal exploitation, so that's mainly in reference to county lines activity. So when children travel from one area to another to sell drugs. And what it ensures is that we have a robust multi-agency partnership safeguarding plan in place, and we will seek to engage parents wherever possible. And on occasion, we've accommodated those young people and placed them outside of borough, or engaged with families to move outside of borough, to move away from the influences of those young people who are usually, unfortunately, it's young people exploiting other young people. So it's a complex picture. We work very hard at formulating relationships. The majority of those people, the young people that are vulnerable, we do assist and we minimise risk. But for a small number, we may have to accommodate or assist the family to move.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next, I see Councillor Woodger, you would like to ask a question?
So you called me next, Chairman, actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Williams was ahead of me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I was going to ask about stability of social work teams, because some of the most serious cases of child abuse have occurred partly because of lack of continuity in social work teams and the use of agency staff and so on. And I wondered sort of what the position is. In the past, we've always been very good in this respect. What the position is in Kensington and Chelsea, and perhaps it'd be useful to provide year-to-year statistics on this.
Yes, I can't provide statistics at the moment. Glenn Peach may be in better place to do that. But what I am aware is that we are very fortunate within this local authority to have long-term consistency in terms of our social work practitioners. A number of us throughout various levels of the organisation have been here for 5, 10, 15, some of us, like myself, over 20 years. So there's a real commitment from us in the workforce to this borough, and to the children and their families. We're one of the highest levels in terms of retention across London. We have low numbers of agency. I think that's about the fact that we may only use agency when it's absolutely necessary, so to cover a maternity post or when we're bridging the recruitment gap. But certainly our motivation is to have permanent staff in place and where they're supported and engaged to continue working for us within the borough. But also, I think one of our great strengths is our level of support and engagement around our systemic offer as well. So we encourage some of the best, I think, practitioners in the overall workforce in social work to come and work for this borough because of what we offer, the training, the support. In comparison to some other of our neighbouring councils, we have a very reasonable kind of caseload for those workers, so they're able to engage with families and spend the time on what's purposeful in terms of one-to-one time, building those relationships with families themselves. So I think we're in a very strong position within this borough.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Councillor Woodger, you have a question?
Yes. Yeah. In the report, in paragraph 11, it's talking about safeguarding in schools. It's also noting that a lot of the meetings as well, it's all kind of moved online with lockdown, as we are right now in this meeting. I'm just wondering how that's affected the sort of quality of monitoring. Are they picking up more or less incidents of issues, and how that's all going down exactly in a virtual sort of sphere?
Yes, I think our schools I'm very glad in terms of our restrictions that schools are now fully operational and have that day-to-day contact with children. It gives us, and from a safeguarding perspective, a lot of assurance. But with that, I think becomes, they've had increasing kind of awareness of low-level emotional needs for children. So we've developed alongside schools our wellbeing strategy and the offer both online but also in person as well, to see how as to what support is available to families. There is a very strong designated safeguarding leads in schools forum where many of these issues are brought to, and actually we've increased numbers and contributions to that, doing it virtually, because we acknowledge that to come physically to a space and be together was very challenging for teachers at the end of the school day. So actually, in terms of gaining that relationship has built, and key to that has been our safeguarding leads for schools and education settings, and our Hilary Shaw, who's our senior inclusion officer as well. So they do a joint approach to that work and support to schools.
And then, so just as a follow-up, when obviously it's great they're obviously back at schools, but when schools weren't sitting, in terms of those meetings happening virtually, I mean, were laptops rolled out to pupils? I mean, how do you make sure they all had access to Teams,
yes.
etc.?
So locally, prior to, because you will be aware that DFE have given grants for laptop purchases for children to ensure that those most vulnerable had access. But we also had internally within the borough a delivery plan for those vulnerable, so those children known to us in social care who were subject to early help offer, child in need offer, or child protection, and are looked after children. We did seek to provide those young people who weren't in possession of a laptop access to one, but also access to wireless modems, internet, to ensure that they're kept online. You will remember, though, during the lifting of restrictions after the initial lockdown, all children who were subject to an education and healthcare plan or were known to social care, so were deemed to be additionally vulnerable, were offered school attendance places. So they were part of that initial cohort along with key workers. So our most vulnerable children weren't out of education or only receiving it virtually they were only receiving virtually for a very short period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take one more question. I see Councillor Durian, you have a question?
I do, Chair. In fact, I have a series of 3 on slightly different topics, but if you think we're pressed for time, I'm happy to do just one.
Or could you put them together?
They are quite distinct. Okay. Let me start with my first one, if that's okay, everyone. You can interrupt me if we're pressed for time. But just on the child protection plans, do we have cases where a child might have to go onto a child protection plan and then that's resolved, they come off it, but then they have to go back on it again, either because of the same reason or a different reason? How often do we have that, and what kind of work are we doing to address that issue? And I note that this was actually a specific area that was shared with Ofsted as part of the department's previous self-evaluation.
Yes, Councillor, you're right. So if you look at 4.9 in the report, that covers the rates of children becoming subject to a plan for a second or subsequent time, and you'll see that we had a significant decrease in that number, and that is in part because of our action plan and our work around that. And you're correct in identifying that Ofsted had highlighted it. I think we have very small numbers of children subject to plan, which you can see from the overall figures. So any shift in that activity has a big percentage increase or decrease. And so that's worth bearing in mind as well. But I do think we worked really hard in the last 18 months to reduce that number, because it's not, for me as a safeguarding lead, it's not effective to have a child on a plan unless that's the best option for that child. So when we have in place a quality assurance review of a case when the child has been subject to a plan previously. So the case will be fully reviewed to evaluate what would be the effectiveness and whether there'd be a positive outcome from pursuing a child protection conference route. So that may be that we feel that more effort should be made with the family or the child targeted approach under a child in need threshold umbrella, or it may be that the social workers are asked and the management are asked to consider whether or not alternative processes need to be adopted. So consider, for instance, legal orders or a public law outline approach where multi-agency assessments are done within a framework that gives a voice to the family and parents and through solicitors and to the child as well in that respect.
No, thank you, Angela, for that. Yeah. My second one is on FGM, obviously a sensitive topic. My question is on some of the cases that were brought to our attention. How was the suspicion raised in the first place? And also in the engagement that we do with the families in question, is it actually made clear to parents that FGM is a criminal offence in the UK? And finally, how do we address the problem where girls are taken abroad and made subject to FGM before returning to the United Kingdom?
Good question.
Sorry, I'm just quickly making a note so to make sure I don't miss anything.
No worries, no worries. I appreciate the whole question.
So in terms of identification of children, of women, young girls who are at risk, we adopt a prevention model, because the only way of limiting the harm is through prevention in this case, because once it's happened, the physical, emotional damage is done. So we adopted a number of years ago very much a maternity clinic approach. So one where we knew that the woman would be seen. We also knew that, there would be a number of our hospitals had set up or were in the process of setting up FGM clinics for their maternity users. So we've engaged in partnership with them as well as health advocates to highlight, one, the legal issues around FGM and the status under UK law, and that this is a type of abuse and harm. It's recognised such. Very often we have positive engagement from women, and that's been our best route and most successful route, is offering support around making informed decisions. And we actually find out a lot of the women themselves very much regret having been cut, and there's lots of cultural influences and extended family influences. So you're right in identifying one of the issues about children being taken abroad, and it's very common for children of families that originate from another country to go away for the holidays. I mean, that's common practice. I think what we've done is we've highlighted those vulnerable communities, and we ensure that there is communication out to the schools, especially prior to the summer holiday period. So, for instance, and we have members from the various communities affected by FGM with us to deliver platforms around information forums, presentations in person to schools, support to teaching staff around the identification of and what routes in to refer to social care. And we have a designated FGM safeguarding lead as well, who leads on this particular area of work and priority to prevent this harm.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Chair, I've actually just realised that my third question slightly hinges on the next report as well, which has been withdrawn. So I'm happy to defer that question until later if you
so,
make
yes.
an introduction. That's fine. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I would like to ask, yes?
Oh, sorry, Chair. I was just going to say I was going to wrap up the report, but I'll let you ask your question first.
Yes, maybe you could answer it. I was just wondering, on all the issues we discussed, you do have counseling available, and I was wondering about the prevention that in order to prevent a lot of the issues, such as being a drug mule or prostitution, which very often can either be initiated by financial needs or by people needing to have attention, or they view that as having attention and being part of a gang or being part of a prostitution ring, etc. I was wondering what kind of prevention and what kind of advice do you give to the families and institutions who take children?
Shall I come in here?
Yes.
I mean, what we talk about nowadays is the exploitation of children, recognizing that for young people, there are adults who will exploit them sexually and exploit them criminally. And you've mentioned drug running, and we know through county lines that that's a significant issue of concern. We're doing lots of work with schools in order to identify young people as soon as concerns start to become apparent. So our early help teams will get involved with children where there are low levels of concern. We know, and Janet, you'll know this, that we know that school exclusions correlate to challenging behaviours and then problematic behaviours, and we know that that can correlate as well to young people being exploited. So we're doing a lot of work with schools about inclusion. We have an inclusion pilot looking at trauma-informed approaches with the whole school. When we were in lockdown, our school support service was working with schools about social, emotional and behavioural approaches with children as they came back to school after lockdown, recognising the impact that being off school, living with COVID, living with the anxiety of COVID, living with the impact of people being sick from COVID. So lots of work has been going on to really think about children's emotional, behavioural, social well-being, and wrapping support around the school so that we can address problems as they manifest as early as we possibly can. We've absolutely, we're transforming our pre-birth to 5 pathway. So again, really thinking about ensuring that children in our borough have the best start and that they're school ready, so that we create the conditions that promote inclusion and promote children doing as well as they can. Our our early help team work really closely, particularly with our primary schools, who offer significant levels of family support, so that actually we get to know with the school the children who they're worried about, so that we can ensure that they have the right support at the right time. Be that individual support to the child, individual support to the parents, or a wraparound service that provides support both to the parents and to the child. Clearly, as the child gets older, you know, the support is more targeted at the young person. And we do have a targeted outreach team really to work with our adolescents, particularly where there are concerns about criminal exploitation, criminal behaviours, in order to prevent that from escalating.
Thank you very much. Now,
Chair,
I'd like
can
to...
I ask a question, please?
Okay, yes, you may.
Thank you. It's about safeguarding in schools.
Mm-hmm.
Paragraph 11.4, operation encompass. I just would like to ask, because it says 29 schools are signed up. Do we know how many schools are not signed and why? Why they didn't sign? Thank you.
Who would like to answer that?
I did have, apologies, I did have that information at hand. I have the exact details, so I'll just call them up.
Oh, fantastic.
Here we go. I apologise for this. Can I just have a second to find it, and then I'll come back to it before we conclude. I apologise.
Thank you.
That's okay. I see Jane Humphreys wanted to say a word, and then we'll come back to Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just thought while I'm just looking for the information, just going back to an earlier point made by one of the members about social workers and stability. I've just had a brief look at the last published Children's Commissioner report on the stability of social work, and actually Kensington and Chelsea is actually the best performing in the London region, and probably the best performing in the country. So I think, you know, what Angela said about that continuity and stability, and the local authority being a local authority of choice is absolutely correct, and it obviously is a very crucial part of working with children and young people, that they have that same social worker as well as the same schools and placements wherever possible. So that should be of some reassurance to members. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go back to Angela. And Angela, are you ready? Angela?
Yes, I am. Apologies. Sorry, it's my connection.
We understand.
With all these things doing it online and wanting to work with speed. So there are currently, we currently have two nurseries out of 4 signed up to Operation Encompass, 18 out of 27 primary schools, 4 out of the 6 secondary schools within Borough. Latimer Education Alternative Provision is signed up, and 4 independent schools within the borough. So some of the issues in terms of blocks, I think, are around, whilst there's not barriers to schools registering in terms of the system, there is need for the whole school sign up. So we are slowly ensuring that, and our aim is to have 100% of our schools within the borough signed up. And over lockdown, we've been able to progress that number as we've engaged further with schools and education settings. So we are, in comparison to across London, we're continuing to do well, but we need to improve that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to just sum up, and you can add to it if you wish, that we are interested in more information, especially when it comes to missing children or where there are children where they say who they just have fallen out of the system. We would like more information about that, please. And more, we appreciate and would like to hear about the continuity between cases, and if there is an inquiry or a specific case, we would like to see the follow-up. One of the counselors said she felt fobbed off, and if that is the case, how can we improve on that? And let's try to get to 100% return visits.
Thank you, Janet. May I have just the wrap up as well from a leadership perspective?
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so I think I'd just like to reiterate everything's come out of the report, that obviously safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and I think that really came through this evening. And evidently, the two reports we've now been speaking for an hour and a half, really shows that the committee is, just as committed as I am to ensure that our children that we look after get the best service and get the best protection for their futures. What we can do as well, I think we can make the NSPCC number available on our child protection publicity campaign we're going to be running over Christmas again, which is what we did over the first part of the initial COVID period, and that is when encouraging people to approach the council or other providers if they've got child safeguarding concerns. Judith, I think you raised a really good issue there with your case that you raised, so I'm really happy to have a chat with you separately with officers as well, just to see where we are with that as well, because of course a committee is obviously not the best place to speak about individual case studies. So I'm really happy to do that with you, Judith, in a time that you are available. And just one last note from me, Chairman. I think just one use of language, and it's just not, it's not no one's got anything wrong, but I just thought I'd highlight that many members of the committee tonight used the word prostitution, which is not a word that we use anymore in the FSCS world. So it's more about children who are being sexually exploited. Is the more modern terminology for that. So just flag that as a thought process to go forward.
Point taken, and that's a very good point. Thank you for letting us know.
So sorry, Councillor. Whitewashing or using language to make things unpalatable seem palatable is an unusual direction for any councillor, let alone any select committee or scrutiny committee, whatever we call ourselves now. Prostitution is the term in law. Sexual exploitation is not, to my best knowledge. So can you say why we are using sexual exploitation now?
I think it's just more...
Is it because there's no monetary... Because prostitution is about selling your body with consent. Are you saying that when it applies to children under the age of consent, that is under 18, it becomes exploitation? It's really a question for officers.
Yes, exactly that. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I thought we were trying to sort of, pretend it didn't exist.
No, of course not. No, not saying that. Not saying that.
In relation to children, it's recognising that it's that they're being exploited.
Yeah, so they're being exploited, but for prostitution.
Yes, can we make a note of that in the minutes, please? I think it's an important point.
We would normally make the distinction between criminal exploitation or child sexual exploitation.
Yes, I mean, there are gangs that exploit the girls in the gangs by sexual favours and stuff, which isn't prostitution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, precisely. So it would be child sexual exploitation.
But obviously, children are sold on the street as prostitutes. So, as I say, I wouldn't want us to feel that suddenly we weren't dealing with that very unpalatable fact because it didn't suit the the sort of Mother Teresa view. There is sexual exploitation in gangs, yes. There are sexual exchanges, but very often young girls are sold on the streets for prostitution, and officers need to be aware of that and not push that under the carpet. And these are young girls who are on the streets selling and with a pimp behind them, and they are selling their bodies and being made to sell their bodies, often for drugs, in return for drugs as well as for money. So this is what's going on.
Yes, well, that's a very good point. I think we should make the distinction. There is sexual exploitation, sometimes sexual favors in exchange for food or clothing. So we should,
drugs.
Or drugs, exactly. So I think we have to mention in the minutes that there is a distinction, please. Are you happy with that from lead member's point of view?
Oh, it's not for me to decide, Chair, what goes in the minutes, but if you are, then yes.
Well, I take your point on that, and I think many of the new terms actually are more palatable, but also for the victims, because they are able then to approach more. And I think it's a good idea. There might be a stigma on other terms for it. So I'm happy with the term sexual exploitation.
That's exactly the issue. Sorry, just to clarify, yes. It's exactly the issue that these young people are victims of exploitation, yes. And it's making that distinction.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. Point taken. So now we shall move on. And well, first of all, thank you very much to Jane Humphreys and to all the officers. It was very helpful. You've spent a lot of time with us and it's appreciated by the committee.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll see you next year, Jane. A6 has been withdrawn, so we will move to A7, which is our verbal COVID-19 update. One of the topics that the Select Committee is reviewing this year is the impact and recovery from COVID-19 in our schools. We reviewed a substantial report at our October meeting, and we have invited the lead member, Councillor Rendell, to update us briefly on what's happened since then until now, to let us know about the issues and challenges that have arisen and what plans does he have to deal with them. Councillor Rendell?
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. And yes, so I thought I would use this opportunity for the committee to do an oral update about the COVID-19 impact and recovery. Of course, everything changes by the day. So it's nothing is set in stone completely, especially along a lot of the testing and vaccination developments, of which I can update the committee shortly. But starting off, so COVID is still having an impact on schools. We're still having, obviously, COVID breakouts in many of our settings. So, for example, in the period from the 24th of October to the end of last week, we had 43 staff in our schools test positive for COVID-19, and then we also had 105 pupils test positive for COVID-19, and that's through all schools and early year settings in that respects. All schools have in place online learning. So in case they do have a severe breakout in a particular area, children can form bubbles or they can go to fully online learning. We've had actually 3 schools since the committee last met that had to go to full online learning due to COVID outbreaks in their schools. And that was the Chelsea Academy, All Saints, and Avonmore Primary School as well, which has just gone into full remote learning as of today. Many of those, for example, for the Chelsea Academy, wasn't necessarily due to mass contagion of COVID itself, but it was just due to business problems in getting the teachers to and from the school and obviously teaching at the school. So Chelsea Academy went online for a period of time. However, they're all back to normal now. In regards to children themselves, we're very aware that children, as of today, have great concern about the impact of COVID-19, especially on their well-being and mental health, especially over the Christmas period. So that's something that we're very much aware of. And of course, we're going to be rolling out, like we did in October, free school meals across the spectrum, which I can get into further detail for that later on if members have any questions on that. And we're also looking into rolling out our further IT program. And I know this is something that Councillor Niall has been really passionate about, and this committee has been passionate about as well. So I've really taken that forward. So much so that we've secured funding from the Section 106 borough-wide fund of £260,000 for new IT. So these will be used to ensure that children who are entitled to free school meals can be provided with a laptop ordered by their schools. So Councillor Niall, I think you'd be very pleased with that development, thanks to your pushing on that. So as mentioned, we've got £260,000 that we're now going to provide IT to students or students who may feel digitally excluded. And what they'll also provide as well is dongles or internet access for those children as well, especially those who need to do remote learning. In regards to COVID itself, so we recently had the lateral flow testing, which is the new name for mass testing, come into RBKC as of last week. We did a pilot actually this week on one of our schools, which was All Saints in North Kensington, where we had a pretty good take up. We had 58 teachers take the test and 38 students from year 10. Of course, year 10s needed parental consent in order to take that up. But all students came back negative, as did all teachers, which was absolutely amazing to see. But it's what we did then was we gave teachers the confidence then to carry out their own tests going forward, especially now Chair RBKC has 36,000 COVID-19 tests that we can roll out to mass locations in a short period of time. Of course, what we will need to do is obviously train those particular people to use them, but they're quite easy to use. As All Saints so heroically did on Tuesday, they made a great success of it as well. So when anything comes up, we'll be doing that. In terms of vaccinations, as you know, these are being rolled out now with the Pfizer vaccine receiving approval end of last week and rolling out this week. For North West London, again, this changes every day. There's only 914 vaccines due to come to us by the end of the year, but they will be going to the most vulnerable over 80-year-olds, so not children or anyone else in this case. But in terms of that, we still really need to ensure that the COVID-19 impact is kept as low as possible. So what we're experiencing at the moment is that children aged between 17 and 19 are currently the widest spreaders of COVID amongst their friends and amongst their peers and, of course, other people. So we need to really ensure that everyone gets the message that the mask, the social distancing, washing the hands, etc., still form an integral part of day-to-day life. I know people are very, very frustrated with it, especially teenagers, of course, and I completely understand that they would want to hang out with their friends, etc. But we're almost there before mass vaccination rollout. Well, we hope to inoculate about 70% of the entire population by the end of April on current trends. But we're nearly there. So just reiterate to all those people out there that the virus is still out there, and to do our best to in order to social distancing. In regards to free school meals, as you know, as this committee knows, as I wrote to all members of the council, RBKC rolled out free school meals in October. As the chair will know, we were one of many, but perhaps one of the first initial Conservative councils to roll that out across the country, and that was for all children on the free school meal voucher system. That is about 3,500 children in RBKC. Those are children in the borough, and those are those children who travel into school in the borough that we covered free school meals for. Going forward into the next year, as you know, the government has provided free school meals over the term break for the Christmas break and the February break and the lead up to Easter, and we've been allocated £472,000 in order to roll that out. So just this week, we've dealt with the last of the logistics on that, and we'll be start putting everything in place to hand out before schools break up next Thursday/Friday on that particular offer. In regards to everything else, such as school attendance, for example, that's still really good despite the COVID pressures, as I mentioned before. So primary school attendance is 93% as of last week, which is well above the national average, which is about 80%. And our secondary school attendance as well is also at that rate, which is also really, really good. But otherwise, everything we're still trying to deal with, obviously, the impacts of COVID itself, obviously the impacts of mental health, especially on children, safeguarding, as we mentioned before, where we're rolling out our safeguarding program again over the Christmas holidays to ensure that everyone is responsible for safeguarding concerns. And then, of course, rolling out the mass lateral flow testing across a wider audience to ensure that everyone is tested quickly and efficiently without any kind of need to wait around, which we had before. But of course, really happy to take questions. And of course, I'm conscious, Nadia, you forwarded me some questions before this committee, which I can read out afterwards as well, and hopefully to provide you some answers on that too. But Chairman, I'll leave it over to you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you very much. As you probably know, 3 hours ago, the Secretary of State for Health announced mass lateral flow testing as much as possible for all secondary school children in the parts of northeast London where the virus incidence has been growing fastest. Would you therefore think it sensible to give the highest priority within our allocation for lateral flow tests to secondary school pupils?
Absolutely. Thank you, Charles. Yeah, that's right. As mentioned, so we have 36,000 tests currently available in our BKC to do that. We only got those last week. So as mentioned, we did the pilot on Tuesday to All Saints, which again was very, very successful. The challenge is in twofold on that. One is we need parental consent for year 10 and under. Which is possible, but not everyone is keen on doing the tests. For the sixth formers where parental consent is not needed, what we're finding is that those pupils don't want to take the test. And the reason for that is because some of them don't want to self-isolate. So if they don't take the test, they don't have to self-isolate. Perhaps understandably, as a teenager around that age, you want to be with your friends and you don't want to have a Christmas on lockdown when they've been on many lockdowns over the course of the past few months. So that's kind of some of the challenges that we're doing. We're trying to work on some communications around that to try and encourage people to take a test. Especially as mass testing is now available at no cost, and you can get the results in 10-20 minutes. So that's what we're trying to do, but I'm conscious what the Health Secretary said today, but yeah, that's something that we've got very much in mind.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mills and then Councillor Blakeman, please.
Thank you. You officers and Councillor Randall might be interested to know that perhaps there's another reason why people aren't taking the tests amongst the young, and that is there is a growing concern, the conspiracy concern, and that the vaccine is being delivered along with especially the nasal testing, the ones where you push.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is a real fear amongst the BAME community. And as I say, I'm only telling you what people tell me, so I have no idea if this is true or not. But people believe that there is a whole kind of conspiracy to try and vaccinate them against their will before the actual results of it are going. So I just say that to you. It's
absolutely
it may not, and that is particularly amongst the so-called BAME community. What I was going to ask you though was, you said that people were going to be vaccinated by the end of April?
Yes, that's right. That's on the current trends, Councillor Mills. That's right.
But who's going to be vaccinated? Because that's not what the government is saying. One, because they haven't got enough vaccination for the Pfizer, so they're assuming. Yeah. Do you know something we don't?
No, Councillor, no, I don't. This is just the updates I've received from our public health colleagues. So that's on the basis that if best case scenario, that is if the Pfizer, the AstraZeneca and the Moderna vaccines are all approved. Of course, only the Pfizer one is at the moment, and that is if all the allocated vaccinations that the government has ordered do come in over the next few months. And if that all works, which of course, I must caveat that it may not, but if it all goes smoothly like that, then the prediction is, and again, it is just a prediction from public health officials, that 70% of those 18 and over will be or have a vaccination available to them if they wish to take it.
Well, I would be cautious about these statistics because, frankly, that's not what the city and other people are saying. So Just as I say caution there, because I mean,
yeah, absolutely. As I say, best, yes.
70% are going to be vaccinated. I mean, I don't think that that's necessarily what third terms are. And the thing I want to ask you was about the 472k.
Yes.
And this was a question I was going to raise later on in your cabinet report, so probably a good idea to do it now, if you don't mind, which is well done on the half-term food. I'm not understanding quite how the food offer is going to work over the Christmas holidays. You've got this voucher, you say, but this voucher is going to go where? How is it going to actually manifest itself? Is it a turkey and mince pies, or is it something rather more useful than that? The food banks are reporting that, but the food banks are also saying that KC isn't dropping some basic supplies to them now. So, if these are vouchers for food banks, are you actually going to be supplying the food banks?
So it's a good question. I'll be able to answer what I know from the free school meal example, Councillor, because this falls in with the community lead, Councillor Siren. But what we've done in regards to free school meals itself, so we're going to be providing school meal vouchers to the schools themselves, who can provide their own students with free school vouchers, so they actually get what they got back in October, and that is they can go to Tesco or Morrison's or whatever they want to shop over the 2-week half term, and that costs about £166,000. And of course, there's much more money available. So what we're going to do as well is we're having a wider need for people for food. So, for example, we're going to be funding schools to meet holiday food needs for families not eligible for free school meals. That can be developed at the discretion of the schools, because, of course, they would know who their parents are better. We're looking at contribution to the local support scheme, which is managed by the housing team. We're looking at, different, we're partnering with VCS schemes to provide shopping services for people who don't need it. So that's people like Bay 20 and other places like that. So hot meals and food parcels will be provided to those. And we've committed a certain fund to help them with that. As mentioned, that hasn't rolled out yet, because we've just looked at just signed off the logistics earlier this week, as of Monday or Tuesday, I think it was. And we're looking at, minibus support for residents in social housing, that's students and that, so they can take them to different places, supermarkets and things like that. And we're also giving all our maintained schools, which is about 39 schools, an uplift in order of them to encourage schools to produce physical vouchers itself rather than e-vouchers. Of course, people who may be digitally excluded may not be wanting to do that. And we're also working with food banks to monitor demand, coordinating with the London Food Alliance, ensuring that they are meeting their weekly targets. And we're also supporting food banks through our support packages, as just mentioned as well. So there's a lot of things happening at the moment, and we're also going to be communicating this through the RBKC website. We're going to be communicating this the best way we can through our social media channels. Of course, that's not going to be open to everyone, but still trying to get the message out there as much as possible, and rolling out our COVID community, and we're also supporting the COVID community campaign, I should say, which is led by Dame Louise Casey, but the details of that are still being confirmed. But that's what we're trying to do at the moment. I think it's a pretty good offer. We're not throwing all our eggs in one basket to say, here's the free school money schools, you go out and sort your children out. We're doing that on part. So what we're trying to do is offer a kind of a holistic approach, a universal approach, whereby people can go to the free school meals, they can go to their hot meals or food preparation, as I said, for example, at Bay 20 or places like that, partnering with the voluntary service, voluntary community schemes, etc., like that, and building teams that we can help people to get this food out over the course of this period, but also into January and February as well, when this program will still run.
Thank you very much. We'll take Councillor Blakeman's question, please, and then Councillor Dorian.
Thank you. A couple of things. First of all, you said Avonmore School. I thought that was in Hammersmith. Did you mean Avondale?
Sorry, yes.
Oh.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
right.
I get.
Yeah, my second point concerns the food banks, and I attended a meeting of the BME Health Forum this morning with Kensington and Chelsea, and it seems that we're not providing sufficient culturally appropriate food, particularly in terms of fresh vegetables, because some communities, they get tins of stuff and they just have to give them to their neighbours because they prefer to cook from fresh.
Thank you, Judith.
Yeah, Sanjay Green
Please.
wrote at the meeting, so perhaps you should liaise with her.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm writing this down. Thank you for that.
Councillor Durian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just one question from me about school finances. Obviously, over the course of this pandemic, schools have really stepped up to make sure that children's education can continue as much as possible. And obviously, our teaching staff have worked really hard to make sure they can deliver that, despite often in many cases difficult personal circumstances as well, long distance travel and so on. And throughout this, schools have obviously had to incur some significant additional expenditure to ensure all this can be safely delivered, particularly when schools reopened, and take simple things like having to procure PPE and so on, having to take on additional agency staff if members of staff have to self-isolate because they have COVID symptoms, to name a few instances. And I know many schools are keeping track of that expenditure. So I'm just wondering what kind of plan may be in place, either at the council or in partnership with central government, to try and either reimburse or support schools with these budgets, because otherwise it creates extra pressure, which then impacts on delivery of other services to our pupils.
Absolutely. It's a good question, Hamish, and it's one that's come up a few times actually from schools itself. If you don't mind, Chair, with your leave, or Councillor Duran with your leave as well, I'm going to pass this question to Sarah, perhaps, or some other officers that may be on the call to answer that specifically.
Very good. Good idea. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just make sure I've understood it quite correctly, just so I provide the right response?
It's Councillor Duran asked, on basis of school finances, as they've had to pay for things like PPE and issues like that, and other COVID-related issues. How we helping them with their finances like that, if at all, or if there's going to be any DfE help?
Yes, there is indeed. Yes, so the COVID expenditure, the schools can claim back. And the government have just outlined a new scheme that assists school in covering the additional costs that they've incurred as a result of COVID-19. I should add that our Director of Operations and Programmes has also been working with schools to make sure they know just how much they can claim back, so that we utilise the government funding in the most optimum way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I come in?
Sorry?
Councillor Nadia, because you can't see my hands where and I put question.
Yes, please. I didn't see it raised. No.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rendell, for this report. And I was, of course, very pleased with the funding of 260,000 for IT. I'm sure there are a lot of families still really in desperate need for this important equipment. And I hope really the communication become more clearer and reach parents from the council through to schools, through to families in need. Because I know there are a lot of families who are not really aware that there is help available.
That's right.
I really hope that will be the case.
Absolutely. That's okay, Nadia. So what we've done is that the Section 106 money, as I mentioned, for the £260,000 for new IT for students on free school meals, that's just recently got through the governance process. So I know last time you said as well that in the last select committee that the communication between schools and parents needs to improve. Yeah. Which I'm very conscious of as well. So when we start rolling this out now, I'll make sure that schools, through the school circular and other pieces of information, that we have contact with schools directly to encourage them to speak to their parents directly who need them. So this funding will be available to them. Of course, the £260,000 will be for the schools to spend on their own and their own parents, because they know who they are. Yeah. But we'll communicate that out for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One quick question. What is happening in terms of the after-school activities. We did have could you just give us a quick update, and will anything be running over the holidays, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Janet. Yeah, so, after-school activities, are continuing. Of course, as we moved into tier 2, that was a slightly bit more easier. So our partners that we utilize, the Harrow Club, Earls Court Youth Club, everyone, Portobello Rugby, all those people who are offering these services are currently doing that. We're working with them, obviously, to ensure that most students or pupils that can access it. Of course, over the Christmas period itself, some people may not wish to utilize those particular services, which is perfectly understandable if they just want to break. But that's currently being available and accessible. So everything should be, available for people to use. Of course, the challenge is when we go into tier 3, if that is possible or likely next week, we may have to look at that slightly again. But in terms of outdoor activity and mixing people, even in a tier 3 scenario, is still allowed, especially in public parks. So we just got to look into that a bit more.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh Rendell, and thank you to the officers who gave us their time tonight. We appreciate it.
May I just say, Nadia, your questions on NEET, can I get back to you in writing on those? I do have them here, but
yes,
it's probably too long to read
fine.
out.
Thank you.
Sure.
I understand. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to A8, the work program report. This report includes a summary of the topics prioritized and agreed at the 20 October Select Committee meeting and an update on the proposed work program, including topic timing and methodology. The purpose of this item is to agree our work program. The 4 topics agreed for the FSSC are COVID-19 impact and recovery in schools, children's safeguarding, Grenfell Education Fund, serious youth violence. At the October meeting, the discussion on the work program was deferred. I would like now for the members to confirm and revise the proposed summaries in point 4 of the work program so we can develop the topics, agree the areas we would like to discuss on, and decide who will be on each committee. I think we can go around the room and we can confirm, around the screen actually, and we can confirm what people have said offline. Shall we start with Councillor Adurian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Happy as previously planned to lead on the working group on the Grenfell Education Fund and to organise a single issue meeting on that next year. We'll probably have some preliminary meetings with relevant officers, possibly the lead member, and see if we can scope that out ahead of that. I look forward to working with my fellow scrutiny members on that.
Excellent. We will now call on Councillor Mills. Can you confirm?
I think that I've been asked to join Councillor Duran, or I've volunteered to join Councillor Duran on that Grenfell recovery, not the Grenfell recovery, but the Education Fund.
Excellent. I look forward to your input. Kathleen Williams?
I'm going to be also joining the Grenfell Education Fund working group.
Thank you very much. And Stella Gomez?
Same with Councillor Dorian on Grenfell Educational Fund.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Williams?
Yes, I confirm that I'm continuing to focus on the North Kensington Mental Health Project, which is mainly under the aegis of the Adult Social Care and Health Committee.
Thank you very much. Councillor Woodger?
Hi, I'm happy to lead on the domestic violence working group and working with Richard Derkey on that.
Thank you very much. And Richard Derkey, can you just confirm personally?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, very happy to take part in that working group. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, Father McNally Cross, he sent in an email saying he would like to participate in the domestic abuse working group. Councillor Blakeman, would you like to say what you would like to do?
I'm waiting confirmation as to whether I can do a Grenfell housing recovery one or not.
Okay, I think that would be something for you to work out with the scrutiny officers. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Nall.
Yes, I'm happy to consider joining the Grenfell Education Fund. And earlier I've asked about the term of reference for domestic violence, and is it a work with the Health and Social Care Committee as well? Or is it just for family and children only?
Well, it's very interesting that you asked that, because really it shows you're interested in all three programs. So why don't you think about that? I'll ask our officer, Jackie Hurd, should Councillor Nail decide tonight, or can she speak to you about it? She's expressed interest in Grenfell education and domestic abuse and no, sorry.
No, I'm happy to join the Grenfell Education Fund, but just that's a question to understand the terms of reference for this working group.
Sorry, you can raise it now, we can have a discussion, but just, I'm sorry, I didn't understand which.
No, I can't join two groups, and I'm a member of the corporate parenting board as well, but I'm happy to be a member of the review for the Grenfell Education Fund.
Okay, thank you very much. And if you have any queries.
Chairman, I think the councillor asked what was the scope of the domestic violence. I think it's a good question.
It is a good question.
Detail. Is it to do with family and children, or is it generally to do with adults, and it comes under adult social care? I think probably it would be a good thing for the committee dealing with it to understand the TORs, or at least for the committee to understand the TORs that it's going to refer to. So perhaps we could answer that question, or officers could answer that question.
I think that's a good idea. Yes, would Councillor Adurian like to open that up to his committee, to his working group, or would you like to ask one of our scrutiny officers?
Where is that? I threw it away already. Oh, why?
I think it was Councillor Williams's group, isn't it?
No, it's not. It's Councillor Durian is doing domestic abuse.
No, Chair, that's I'm working on leading on the Grenfell Education Fund.
You are, yes. Oh, sorry, I mean Councillor Woodyer.
Yeah, that's me. I thought the idea was to focus more on parent to child and child to child, to be more focused. If you make it more too broad, the committee, it could just take too long. I think. I mean, obviously, adults, social care and health are very welcome to do their own separate one on adults versus adults. But I think to have it focused is much better.
Okay, and I think, does anyone else on the domestic abuse, would anyone else like to say anything? Richard Derricky, perhaps?
I think, Janet, it's Mary Therese here. Jackie would like to say something.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, thank you. Please do.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, obviously, it's up to the councillors to scope the working group because it's your working group. But my recommendation would be that you do focus, as Councillor Woodger has said, on the families and children's aspect rather than adults, that you keep to the terms of reference of the committee, although you might want to make linkages. So that would help you to complete the work if it's focused, and that would be consistent with your committee.
MT, did you want to say something?
Not about that particularly. I just wanted to say, in answer to Judith Blakeman, that I think we could perhaps, in view of what we said earlier in the pre-meeting, add another topic, which would be looking at people living and children living in unhealthy homes. And I would ask maybe that Paula and Jackie could look at that and scope it to see what could be done. And I think Councillor Julie Mills was also perhaps interested in that topic.
Councillor Mills, Councillor Blakeman, are you happy with that?
Well, that's not quite what my concern is.
What's your concern, Judith?
Well, my concern is people on who need rehousing, who don't come under the Grenfell, the wider Grenfell housing policy, but have got a serious Grenfell connection, and the effect that it has on them and their children.
Jackie, I'm going to ask you to come in here, if you can suggest how we could approach that topic.
Yeah, I think we'd need to involve Councillor Ali as chair of the Housing and Community Select Committee. I don't think he's very well at the moment, so he's not available, but I would be happy to. Yes, he has. He let me know. But Councillor Blakeman, I'd be happy to set up a meeting with you and him, and if you want me to come as well to provide officer support to discuss it, if that would help.
No, I need a meeting with Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Right, okay, that's fine. But I thought if you want to meet with the lead member, that's fine. Sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you wanted to look at it as a scrutiny topic.
Well, I was trying to fit it into the scrutiny requirements. I mean, it's an issue that really worries me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So
I think what we're trying to do is fit it into the remit of this select committee.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could look at if there is a way that we could do that.
Could I have a further discussion with Councillor Blakeman to get more details? Could I?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm being forced to opt into going one of the working groups, and I don't wish to go onto any of the working groups that have been identified.
You're not being opted, excuse me. Sorry, you said you were interested in housing, and we're very happy for you to pursue that with the officers so that you don't have to be in one of these working groups, because it's an interest of yours and it makes a lot of sense. It's a very perceptive and interesting and relevant issue. Would you like to pursue it in that way, Councillor Blakeman?
Well, I am pursuing it.
Okay, I think at this stage we'll just set up a meeting, Jackie, with you and Judith and perhaps me.
Yep. Yeah, I'll be in touch and I'll find a time that's convenient for us all so we can talk about it in more detail. Thank you, councillors.
Okay, thank you very much for your input.
And could I just say that notwithstanding obviously a very specific topic that Councillor Blakeman has raised, the issue of unhealthy homes for this committee, if Councillor Rossi is happy to let us look at that down the line in terms of a new work group, would be a good suggestion, because housing stays with us and repairs stays with us, and children growing up in that atmosphere also does. So I think it's a worthwhile topic for this committee. Going forward, I appreciate that it may, there may not be time now, but perhaps it's someone that could go to the top of the list.
Okay, well I think we'll look into it.
But it must include the housing associations, because they're the main culprits. I mean, the direction of travel of the RBKC social housing department is good.
Okay, we'll leave that with you and the officers to decide your direction of travel with that. Is that okay, Councillor Blakeman?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. And Councillor Nail, you're happy with this?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
Nail, not Councillor Nail.
Sorry?
It's Councillor Nail.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I stand corrected.
Thanks.
Okay, next. So this is agreed, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, and I move that we go to the minutes now. Second. Does anyone have any corrections for the minutes, or do we agree the minutes?
It's very minor. It's Maxwell, not Max, in the minutes.
Okay. Catherine, do you have that?
Yes, I've noted that.
Okay, good. Does anyone else have anything to add to the minutes?
Yes, I think I raised in the pre-meeting that I was uncomfortable with the fact that the committee praised and then went on to talk about the large overrepresentation of Caribbean youth. I don't think that's, if I may suggest, is a sensitive term. I think, we would want to use something more neutral.
And which term? For Afro-Caribbean?
The term praised.
Okay.
So there were two praises. The committee praised officers and then the committee praised officers. But I think the idea of praising the fact that there was overrepresentation of Afro-Caribbeans within the sort of criminal world is not the right thing. So perhaps officers could take that away and get a more appropriate term. Would be my suggestion.
I take your point.
And then the other thing that I wanted to raise as I'm sort of on mic is the Local Education Partnership Board. I think it came under that paper in the minutes, but possibly from Councillor Rendell's report. And I really don't know what that is, but it seems to be trying to address or join up antisocial behaviour, criminality and marginalised people in the community. And again, a plea to make sure, I don't know who's on that Educational Partnership Board, but again, a plea to make it effective, productive, and actually representative so that people will actually talk to it to try and understand, work out what the problems, to work out the ongoing problems within the community, the inequalities within the community. And I was not very happy with the counselling by Zoom, but as this meeting has progressed, officers have indicated that that young people, vulnerable people, seem to be happy with that medium. So I'll take that question, if I may, off the table unless anybody else has a concern about that. And thank you for answering the questions on school uniform. As you can see, if you then add in shoes and a winter coat, we are getting close to 400 per child. And I think that the idea that you can go to Marks and Spencer's and just get a cheap pair of one pants, or, usually would need 2 sets of trousers, 2 sets of shirts. I think officers may want to explore whether that is expensive for families on lower incomes. You've only provided the information for the 2 academies, but recently I've also had representations that those people who send their children to private schools and who are out of work are also struggling with the costs of uniforms. And, I think I've put in my email to officers this acculturation through uniform. Do we need to be reviewing this so that people can go down to shops and pick up a perfectly suitable pair of black long trousers or skirts that isn't a brand name? So I would like, Orbit, thank you for the response. I would like us to continue to think about this, because I've now had 3 charities that I work with raise this issue separately.
That's a very important issue. Yes, Councillor Rendell?
Yeah, can I also say that with, I didn't realise we're onto the tracker, so I'd like to comment on the tracker with regard, first of all, to the uniforms. What Councillor Mills says about buying a cheap pair of trousers at Marks and Spencer's or at George or wherever. There are some schools in the borough that won't accept them, and they expect the parents to buy the expensive, not mentioning Holland Park Academy, of course. And my other comment on the tracker is in relation to the CAMS service. It says that there is lots of public transport. There isn't. That's the problem. That was the question I was asking about, that the accessibility, particularly from the north, but also indeed from the rest of the borough, apart from the centre, getting to CAMS in Beatrice Place is virtually impossible, especially if you have to pay bus fares for more than one child.
Right. May I call on the scrutiny officers, please? How do you recommend amending the minutes? Because it seems we're on another track of inquiry. Should we make it as a suggestion?
Tracker.
Councillor Evans, I think that the discussion's about the tracker, so we've made a note of the comments of councillors, and I think we'll have to go back to directorate colleagues and follow up on the comments that have been made.
Okay, could I add to that, please? If you could have the officers tell us what funding is available at the different schools for the uniforms, because I understand there is some help available, and since it is it's very expensive uniforms, it was a good point that was brought up by Councillor Mills. And could you add to that about what funds are available? I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, we will, and we'll circulate a note around the committee. Thank you.
Chairman,
yes,
can I just make 2 points? Firstly, on the school uniforms, I was surprised at how high the cost for Holland Park was. And I mean, I'm not saying doing it now, but there is the option of this committee. You could write on behalf of this committee to the governing body of a school if you're unhappy about the matter. Bear that in mind. Secondly, on the question of the CAM service, obviously the issues Councillor Blakeman raised are something my group will look at. And yes, it is very important.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
And can I add? So I was just going to have my one follow-up on in the tracker, and I'm sorry I mixed up the minutes in the tracker. I sort of rather took them, must be the hour, took them as sort of one document. So my apologies for that. But when it says that one of the reasons why I raised this topic some time ago was because when the report talks to there's help available and just come and see the schools and they'll organise a uniform by payment by installments and so forth. It comes across, and I can tell you this from the client group that I'm dealing with, and it's not one, it's several. It's a very patronising approach. Now, when families are on low income, may have more than one children, in fact usually do, and then have to go and sort of beg the principal to, we haven't got enough money, we're getting free school meals, we're on universal credit, we have got, I'm out of a job, I need getting on housing benefit and so forth. It's not an appropriate kind of it's too hierarchical, it's too old-fashioned, it smacks of noblesse oblige. And the present community doesn't like it. So we've got to find a way of signposting families who need extra help, and that's whatever their threshold, to either other sources of income and support, or else we've got to tell the schools that this old-fashioned idea of only having, Bates in Oxford provide your uniform is no longer acceptable in this day and age, and they've got to review it. So, if I may say, that's a follow-up to what came across in the report, which I thought was unhelpful to the group of people that I'm dealing with. Can I come in, please, Chair?
Yes, you may.
Oh, thank you. What I would like to say with regard to this issue, I think it's council to look at its responsibility of offering funds to help families who are in need for school uniforms. Yes, there are different schools offering support, but sometimes as well the communication with parents to know there is help available. I've helped 2 families recently through the council, and they managed to get support for the uniform cost. But I think it's not going to be viable by us writing to each secondary school for them or primary to accept that parents can buy a generic items from any retailers. I think it's up to the council as well to offer some fund or support these schools and make sure every family not struggle because of school uniform and that will affect their other needs. So I think we should get a report from the council about what they are doing and how they're supporting schools to provide support for these families.
Thank you very much for your points. Jackie, can you tell us how you suggest we take this forward? Because there have been several ideas suggested here.
Yes, so councillors have, one suggestion was that councillors, the committee might write to the schools, I think. Councillor Mills said that. And there've been other suggestions. I think it would be best, if you don't mind, if I could just either have a summary or look at the minutes and then come back to you.
Okay, I suggested also, and some other people, that perhaps they could also find out what funding is available and from where. Some individual schools have funding, and there are several organizations in the borough that do fund school uniforms.
Yeah,
if
so
I'm not mistaken.
we can ask for that list to be compiled.
Exactly. And how they get in touch. That would be great.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, and I thank all the officers for their support, our lead member, our committee members, our lovely co-optees. I'm happy we have a direction, and I wish everyone a happy holiday. The meeting is complete.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Happy Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.